You know, as we move into the summer of 2020, we are facing a daunting task, aren't we? As we are re-entering our world, as our world is beginning to reopen, after humanity's being placed in timeout for what? 8 weeks, 10 weeks, whatever it is. We have to ask ourselves, what kind of world do we want to re-enter into? You know, I believe we are living in an especially unique time in the evolution of our planet and the evolution of our species. We have hit what Dwayne Elgin, who is an internationally recognized author and speaker on the subject of planetary transition, calls an evolutionary wall. A wall where humanity is in a race between collective awakening or global catastrophe. I believe this pandemic has been a universal invitation, inviting humanity to wake up spiritually, not only individually, but more importantly, collectively. I believe it's an invitation that has been extended to us before. An example of that is in the economic crisis that was experienced in 2008. At that time, I remember Pope Benedict saying something in his 2008 Christmas Day message as he addressed all those who were being affected by the global crisis back then, where he said, "May the light shine forth and encourage all people to do their part in a spirit of authentic solidarity." He said, if people looked only to their own interest, our world will certainly fall apart. So as we move towards re-entering our world after our time-out experience, I believe these words still ring true. If we look only to our own interest, our world will certainly fall apart. So may the light shine forth and encourage us to do our part in a spirit of authentic solidarity. As I said, I believe we are being presented with an opportunity to stand together once again and develop a spirit of authentic, or I think a better way of saying it is a spiritual solidarity. In times like this, or back in 2008, it's easy to slip into a self-preservation mode. But I believe these global crises are more the universe inviting us to take inventory and consciously shift ourselves away from the path of separation to a path of reconnection and reconciliation. An invitation to find ways to live more in harmony or solidarity with each other and the world. An invitation to go beyond oneself, to experience and engage with others. And an invitation to bring others into our thinking and life. To deconstruct barriers we have created that divide us and build right relationships. Right relationships with God, with each other, and our planet. We are being invited to stop living selfishly and to stand together in spiritual solidarity. For the solutions to our challenges that we face will not be solved individually. They will have to be solved at the level of the collective consciousness. Dwayne Elgin predicted back in 1997 that in the decade of 2020, humanity would hit an evolutionary wall where the material powers would become so great as to destroy the ecological foundation of the earth, leaving humanity with no alternative but to work together in the common task of survival. Humanity's response, he said, would be a profound test of our collective intelligence and collective consciousness. That billions of people would be challenged or invited to become conscious of our process of planetary evolution and to consciously shift from a path of separation to a path of reconnection and reconciliation. He said if we cooperate in responding to this invitation, the result could propel us onto a path of sustainable development by releasing humanity's collective energy for the common work of building a positive and nurturing future. But if we do not work together and fail to mobilize our capacity for collective consciousness, then hitting this evolutionary wall could produce a devastating crash and send us on a long detour into a new dark age. As Carl Jung said, in the history of the collective, as in the history of the individual, everything depends on the development or the evolution of consciousness. So how can we participate in awakening the collective consciousness into authentic spiritual solidarity, when so much of our division has been the result of religious differences? You know, this is one of the reasons that this talk is entitled Standing Together for Good instead of Standing Together for God. Because so much of our history shows us that when people think they are standing together for God, they are standing together for their concept of God and excluding others that have a different concept of God. Brother Wayne Teasdale, a pioneer of the interfaith movement, has identified 7 commonalities at the core of the world's great religions. 7 elements that can unite us and bring us together in spiritual solidarity instead of separating us through theological differences. The first of these elements of universal or spiritual solidarity is the foundation of the spiritual life in any tradition, and that is moral capacity and commitment. Any true spiritual path is always committed to living and being moral, to living life by the golden rule. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you, or do not do to others that which you would not have them do unto you. Another common aspect of spirituality that is found throughout all world religions is the deeply rooted attitude of nonviolence. Nonviolence is a form of love, a way to spread peace. And if we wish to teach peace, we must live nonviolently. The next of the elements is spiritual unity or oneness, a common element in authentic spirituality, not only with each other, but with all life and with our planet as well. As I often say, we are one in God, and in God we are one. Then there is the general spirituality, that general spirituality always contains a spiritual practice. A practice that brings about the process of interchange. For without interchange, spirituality is neither authentic nor viable. The spiritual practice may consist of some form of prayer, meditation, contemplation, spiritual reading, reflection, study, work, or simply resting in the divine. The only criteria to a spiritual practice is that it must be transformative. It must initiate, follow through, and sustain fundamental, radical change in the seeker. Spiritual practice initiates a fourfold transformation. Transformation of consciousness, of will, of character, and of action. This fourfold transformation has self-awareness or self-knowledge as its basis. And again, all genuine spirituality requires a comprehensive self-awareness or self-knowledge. One's consciousness grows through knowledge, experience, and awareness, giving way to a spiritual maturity where the person's will is then transformed. One no longer seeks selfish ends, but becomes more other-centered, pursuing harmony with the divine will and with the totality of life. One's character experiences a far-reaching transformation, one where the person becomes more and more grounded in virtue, grace, and holiness. One where the person submits to love and is shaped by this into a loving, wise, compassionate being. And one's behavior is altered as selfish patterns give way to selfless actions that are governed by love, kindness, compassion, mercy, and wisdom. The fifth element of a universal spirituality is simplicity of life, or lifestyle. Best expressed in the saying, live simply so that others may simply live. Our self-indulgent consumer society has created and continues to create a serious deficit to the planet itself. Simplification of life means using only the resources that are needed. This principle of spirituality thus translates into a benefit for the earth and all its inhabitants. And we have seen this take place in this time of quarantine, as we have been forced to live more simply. We have seen a benefit to our planet. As Gandhi often remarked, that the earth has sufficient resources for humanity's needs, but not for its greeds. The sixth principle is the principle of selfless service. Transformation leads naturally to the development of a sensitivity to the plight of others. A person's relationship with others becomes grounded in compassion, kindness, love. One becomes capable of thinking and acting beyond self-interest, able to discern among the needs of others what is required based upon justice and generosity. Selfless service is found in every valid expression of the spiritual life and is one of the infallible signs of its genuineness. The final element common to the world religions, final element of universal spirituality, is prophetic action, the willingness to call for change. Now, this willingness to call for change may mean taking a courageous stand for others in matters relating to justice, peacemaking, economic policy, refugees, hunger, poverty, women, the elderly, children, the unemployed, the homeless, the whole critical issue with our environment. Prophetic action requires the courage to take a stand that may have political implications and consequences. Our global spiritual solidarity must possess the ability to speak out when the occasion requires it. And believe me, today it is required. It is an essential demand and function to awakening our collective consciousness. We have hit an evolutionary wall. And there are two possible outcomes. Either we will experience a collective awakening, or we very well may experience a devastating crash, sending us into a long detour on the evolutionary path. So understanding these 7 commonalities of the world religions, a capacity to live morally, nonviolence, spiritual unity, spiritual practice and comprehensive self-awareness, simplicity of lifestyle, selfless service, and prophetic action can provide us with the basis of discovering the rich bonds of sacred community, those bonds that bring us together, those bonds that allow us to stand together in authentic spiritual solidarity and release humanity's collective energy for the common work of building a positive and nurturing future. So as we come out of this time out, I invite you to ask yourself, where am I being invited to grow, to evolve? Where are we as a spiritual community being invited to grow and to evolve? Where are we as a unity movement being called to grow and to evolve in order to contribute to awakening the collective consciousness in a spirit of solidarity? What kind of leaders will we need to lead us forward into awakening to our authentic spiritual solidarity? Because the truth is, together we will stand, and divided we will fall. The choice is ours.